Hey everybody, welcome to the latest edition of Beyond the Hype. We have a powerful conversation that we're going to have today with this question: is your money racist? And I have the perfect guest who asked this question for today's show, Allan Boomer, the managing partner of Momentum Advisors. Allan, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for the intro, and I'll tell you, Brother Alfred, I appreciate you. We had the occasion to be on a panel discussion about men and fatherhood a few weeks ago, about Black fatherhood, and I really enjoyed your discussion, and I'm just glad to have a chance to be together with you in this forum today. I'm a huge fan of you. I'm also a huge fan of your organization, Black Enterprise. I'm a graduate of Morgan State University. My degree literally says the Earl G. Graves School of Management, School of Business Management. And so, you know, for me, Black Enterprise, Earl Graves has always been an icon, has been, you know, someone who I've always aspired to. You know, even being on those lists, man. When I was young, looking at those different lists that you guys would put out, top Blacks on Wall Street, the biggest Black companies, the IPOs, like I wanted to be on there, man. So it's just such an honor to be here today. I'm the CEO. Let me say that again. I'm the managing partner, is what I call myself, of Momentum Advisors. We are a wealth management and investment advisory firm based in New York City with clients all over the country.
Excellent, excellent. So let's just jump right into it. You know, I've had a couple of discussions offline. Again, thank you for coming on the show. I enjoyed your presentation at the event we both spoke at as well, which kind of sparked even leading us to this show. But you challenge people with this question: is your money racist? You know, so why don't you just talk to me about where that idea comes from and what we need to be thinking about beyond being triggered to buy Black when we see a video of a Black man with a knee on his neck for the last 8 minutes and 46 seconds of his life. Because too often, that's when we react in that way. It's a good reaction, but it's not a sustainable one.
Yeah, this is an important conversation. You know, when Brother Floyd passed away at the hands of a police officer, it was it was the straw that broke our back collectively. You know, we've been upset since well before this, but in 2020, it's like one of the first time I really see meaningful action towards us coming together and taking advantage of our collective voice and our collective power. This is a powerful time. And so if we're having a conversation, why not include our money? You know, and I think that a lot of times it's easy to say, I want to buy Black when it comes to restaurants and hair care. But do we think about buying Black when it comes to other professional services? And in the case of what I'm talking about is really with your investments, you know, because there's a stat that says in the professional money management world, there's over $70 trillion in assets that are being managed. Would you believe only 1% of those assets is being managed by minorities? And that's not just Black people, that's all people of color. And so you would think that maybe we're not good at investing, but I would also point you to stats that show, number one, diverse teams make better investment decisions. That's in business. It's also in portfolio management. Number two, within asset management, they found that these minority-owned firms actually perform the same or better than non-minority firms. And so just to summarize, we have 1% of the assets under management.
Less than, really.
Less than.
Right.
But we actually outperform or do no worse than our white counterparts. So why is it that there's so little money placed with these Black-owned managers? I came to one conclusion. It must be that your money is racist. Our money is racist as a people. The systems that are in place that get money into the hands of professional management, it's rigged against Black people. And that's really the genesis of the conversation.
Wow, wow. So what does that mean? What is the impact on we talk about Black wealth creation, the wealth gap, the other disparities that African-American communities face that's been exposed by both the Black Lives Matter movement and the protests, as well as obviously what we're going through with the global pandemic. What does it mean when less than 1% of $70 trillion of manageable money is in the hands of Black people?
Yeah, I mean, for one, it's a slap in the face because we have money. Like, I could see if we had only 1% of that $70 trillion in terms of ownership, but some of that money is inside of pension funds, and those the people who will receive those pensions, they're police officers, they're firemen, they're teachers, right? They're janitors. These are there's Black folks in those jobs that stand to receive those pension dollars. And so it's a slap in the face that that money is not being managed by people, but whose money it is. The next slap in the face is the people that have a 401k. That's almost everybody. If you've got a 401k, that money is being professionally managed. Well, who's managing the money? Is it firms of color? Is there even a firm of color on the list? And what we're finding is, on average, we're not even on the list. Our Black firms aren't even on the list at major corporations in terms of one of the managers that you could even select from if you wanted to. But the other slap in the face is when we think about those of us who have IRA accounts or who have brokerage accounts, what percentage of the money that we own, that we control, have we elected to invest with Black money managers? And we just may not realize that they're out there. I mean, there's been organizations like Black Enterprise. You guys have been banging the drum on this for years. I was reading about Blacks on Wall Street for over 20 years through Black Enterprise. So we're not new to this. We've been around for a long time. And what's crazy, you know, when you look at it, think about the Forbes list, the list of the wealthiest people in America. A lot of those people are in technology, but there's a lot of folks that are from financial services. There are people, you ask, what's the impact to wealth creation? Well, if we aren't getting our fair shot at a chance to manage money, then clearly for those owners of those businesses, we're missing out on a chance to be on that Forbes list. We're missing out on a chance to create wealth. And in our community, we're missing out on a chance to make an outsized return, because we already said the minority-owned firm actually invests a little better than the non-minority firm. So we're losing out on both sides, on the wealth creation side and on the chance to perform as investors.
Wow, you know, as you said, Black Enterprise has been covering this for decades, and you are annually listing the top Black asset managers, the top Black investment management companies. And you're right, those firms aren't just great Black companies, they actually are great companies. I mean, the one that comes to mind is Ariel Investments out of Chicago, the legendary firm created by John Rogers. That's always been one of the top performers in its space, practically since the beginning. And they launched in, I think, 1987, somewhere in the late 80s. So you're right, it's not that it's new or that they're not firms and managers who are out there. But how do we get, I don't know how to ask this question. If the firms exist, and even if you take away the firms, there are Black professionals even in the mainstream firms that are there, and then there are, you know, independents, and then there's this, is it a lack of awareness? Is Black Enterprise not done a great job of connecting the average African American with these firms? I mean, what do you see has to happen for us to really get our arms around buying Black being more than what store we went to or what restaurant we went to eat at?
Yeah, we've got to open up our minds to the notion that we need to buy Black with every dollar that we're spending. We don't often think about our investments as a part of what we're spending. But if you own a mutual fund, if you own an exchange traded fund, these are all being managed by somebody. Does that person look like you? Are they from your community? You also have to start thinking, you mentioned, you know, the firms where there might be some Black folks working there. If we're not investing with the Black-owned firm, are we investing with firms that are diverse? Like, have we even asked the question about it? Because I think the issue is there's a default. Like, we're just gonna go with the biggest. We're just gonna go with, like, I'll tell you, like, as a person who runs a firm, and I've been on Wall Street for 20 years. I started my firm 8 years ago. If you had asked me 5 years ago to build a portfolio for you, my portfolio was racist, man. I will admit it. I went to places like BlackRock. I went to T. Rowe Price. I went to the names that you've heard of, Vanguard, because that's what I was taught. I was taught when you're looking for a money manager, the first thing you look at is how long have they been around? Have they been around for 10 years or more? And then the second thing is how much money are they managing? How many billions of dollars are they managing? But when you look at it that way, you're missing out on a whole swath of investment managers that might have been newer. Because again, you know, when I think back to it, you know, my great-grandfather was a slave. There's somebody else who owns an investment firm today whose great-grandfather probably started the firm. So even though, like you said, we've been in it since, you guys have been talking about Blacks on Wall Street since the 80s, we're late. We're a little late to being able to create our own firms. So if people are automatically saying, in order for me to put dollars with you, you needed to be in business for 10 years or more, Black firms are already at a disadvantage. If the next statement is that you need to have at least, you know, $5 billion or $10 billion under management, it's another disadvantage. Because again, we only manage 1% of the assets, or less than 1%. And so, you know, we need to first have the conversation. Is my money racist? The first question I would ask anybody, what percentage of your portfolio, and that would include your 401k, your IRA, and if you have a brokerage account, what percentage of it is being managed by Black people? Simple question. If you don't know the answer, ask your financial advisor to look it up for you. That's the beginning of the conversation. The next conversation is, what do you want to do about it? Are you going to set a minimum and say, look, I at least want 25% of my money to be managed by people of color? Or am I okay that I'm at 0% on that? So that's one aspect. The next aspect is to think about the companies that you might invest in. You know, often we're just looking for a return. But what if you found out that the return was at the expense of your values? What if you found out that you made a profit off of private prisons, or you made a profit off of, you know, a company that's backing Trump and you're against Trump? We've got to think about this more than with the dollars that we spend as we spend on food. We need to think about it as we spend as investors as well.
Wow, that you said, that's a lot, man. So let me hit on a couple of things. Again, one of the challenges, one of the blessings of working at Black Enterprise, and I've been there over 30 years, is that we almost kind of live in a bubble at Black Enterprise. Like the stuff that you're talking is like the way we live. You know, every month is Black History Month. Every day we support Black-owned businesses. And so everything you talk about is I've lived. I mean, I paid for my oldest daughter's college education because I invested in a Black-run fund, Eugene Profit.
Wow.
And his name is Profit. So it was a profit fund. And when it was time for my oldest daughter to go to college, one of the reasons I had some money to go toward her tuition was because I invested in this brother's fund. It was a great fund. He was a former football player with the New England Patriots, by the way, who was inspired by Reginald Lewis to go into that business when he retired. So on the one hand, I'm like, yeah, that makes all kinds of sense to me. But on the other hand, like you said, most of us aren't even thinking about it. We're not doing it. That's the way most people think. How much of this, I'm gonna go right to the core of this, is your money racist question. How much of this is the remnants of, whether we're conscious of it or unconscious of it, this idea that if you want somebody who knows what they're doing to manage money, they need to be white? How much are we still wrestling with this idea that that you need an E.F. Hutton type, you know, old white dude with the bow tie, not a brother? You can't, you know, how are you dealing with that?
You went right to it, didn't you?
I do. It's beyond the hype, man. That's what we do here.
I'm not sure, man, because what's funny is when we start having a conversation and we give people the facts, the statistics, I've never found a person say, no, I don't want to invest with a Black money manager because I think the white guy is going to do a better job. What I increasingly hear is, I never thought about it. I just never thought about it. And at my job, I just picked from the list. I never thought that maybe there should be some Black firms on the list. Just never thought about it. So I will give our people more credit than that, in the sense that I just don't think folks are thinking about it. So I've been beating this drum. Me and my partner, Tiffany Hawkins, we have a radio show on Sirius XM. We hope to have you on very soon, by the way. You know, we
Yeah.
went out and started talking about this a year ago. And then this year we've been, every couple of weeks, we've been bringing it up again. We're actually going to get this phrase trademarked, you know, this idea of is your money racist? Because we've looked at, you know, not just, because this is a conversation about diversity that really, it started in the pension fund community. Like pensions, like if you think about like New York State, for example, they have a target of having X% of the pension fund be managed by Black people. You know, the state of Illinois has a target like this. The pension fund community has been having this conversation for years. Recently, the foundation community, the private foundation world has started to say the same thing. It hasn't really started yet in the individual realm with people thinking about their 401k and their IRA account. And we're trying to be the ones to bang that drum and to really just start this conversation, you know, is your money racist? But in this analysis, I'll tell you, you know, we did look at our HBCUs, and I don't want to, you know, I'm an HBCU grad. I went to Morgan State. I don't want to, you know, shame them. But our HBCUs control some money. They control billions of dollars, you know. The HBCU endowments, sure, they're a little smaller than the non-HBCU endowment. But, you know, our largest endowment, Howard University, has 10% of its money with Black people. Now, you could say that's great because the average endowment might have 1 or 2%. But I'm saying that means 90% of the money is outside of Black people. Howard graduates a ton of people that work on Wall Street, many of whom would love to own their own firms. But if Howard, our largest endowment, is at 10%, I can only imagine what Harvard is at. I can only imagine where other universities are. And so we need to think about this both in our own households, but also with dollars that are controlled by Black people. You know, we also looked at how the HBCUs spend money. Like we looked at, you know, what are their biggest contracts? You know, and we looked at Morehouse and Spelman. Their biggest contracts are in food service, in janitorial, and architecture. And across the board, we're finding that they're with white firms. They're with, you know, firms that leadership team, 100% white people on board. And again, going back to what do we have to do different, we need to just start thinking bigger about the concept of buying Black. We need to think about, for everything that we buy in our personal lives, or everything that we touch in terms of a vendor or a supplier in our corporate lives, are we buying Black? And if not, is it because of some sort of, whether it's conscious or unconscious racism?
How encouraged are you, and this is not just starting with the killing of George Floyd, but the kind of the latest generation of wokeness, if you will, Black Lives Matter, even before that, that it seems that athletes like LeBron James, entertainers, actors who are more high profile people who have higher incomes, seem to be leaning into this idea of, again, like you said, not just buying Black, meaning where you spend your money, but buying Black in terms of your agent, your accountant. I don't know how much of it is an actual trend, but there seems to be at least a little bit more vocalness and visibility around this idea that Black athletes, Black celebrities are now kind of stepping up to this idea that they can leverage their wealth in ways that dovetails a little bit with where you're going.
I love it. I love that folks are talking about it. I just want to see it actually happen. And what I mean by that is that often you'll see it's easy to make a post and you know, you post about Black Lives Matter. It's something completely different to really employ Black Lives Matter in your own life. And what I mean by that is there's a number of athletes, and not LeBron. LeBron, I think, is the model. You know, like LeBron has a Black agent. He's doing a lot to help Black people, you know. But there's a lot of athletes that have white agents, that have white accountants, that have white financial advisors, that are not with Black firms. And I know this because I've been covering athletes as an investment advisor, a financial advisor, for 13 years. And I've competed against, I've gone into what they call it the dog and pony show, where you go and you compete and you see the guys that are in the waiting room. And when you don't get the business, you know, and you know you were the only brother in the room, I'm not saying that they didn't pick me because I was Black, but I will say that, you know, not every athlete has that LeBron James view. that they're actually implementing in their lives. And so my hope is that we start to talk about it more, we continue to talk about it, and that we then start to really take action towards it. And I'm talking about every single person that these folks hire, they should at least, implement their own Rooney Rule. Interview a Black person for that job. I'm really encouraged because I have a number of clients who, and I don't think any of our clients chose Momentum Advisors because we're Black. I think they chose us because they felt that we do the best possible job for them. But, I'm encouraged that I've got a number of clients who said to me, I appreciate that you're a Black person and that you're going to do a good job, because you also are going to understand me a little bit better than someone who doesn't share my background. But could you also introduce me to other Black professionals? I want a Black estate attorney. I want a Black accountant. I want a Black real estate agent. And when I make those referrals, I'm not saying it's an automatic match, that it's automatically going to work. But I will say I'm encouraged by the fact that folks are really asking those questions and seeking out those advisors that look like them.
This dovetails with both your conversation about HBCUs as well as what you just shared about athletes, other high-profile, high-income individuals, at least considering Black professionals as people that can help manage and provide services for them. How encouraged are you by, and again, it's probably way too early to call it a trend, but you're seeing some high-profile high school athletes, blue-chip high school athletes, either declaring that they're going to go to HBCU when they would normally be earmarked for a mainstream, major program, particularly in basketball, some in football too, or even some, at least a couple of young men who've actually committed to PWI and then said, no, I'm changing my mind. I'm going to go to this HBCU program. Do you think that the next generation may even have a more of a fertile mindset, if you will, for this conversation and maybe thinking a little bit differently, so that you have more LeBron James type thinking in the next generation?
Yeah, I'm really encouraged by it. The kid Maker, who's going to Howard, he made a huge wave with his decision to go there. This kid was a top 10 talent. Like this kid is going to the NBA. This kid is going to bring a lot of attention to Howard University. He's going to bring attention to HBCUs in general. In order for this trend to last, the HBCUs are going to need to invest a little bit in their athletic programs. They will need to upgrade their facilities. I think some of these TV networks are going to need to start covering some of these games, and that's going to pump money into the schools, which will allow them to reinvest. Because I think the issue today is that you look at an HBCU's facilities and reach, and you look at a Duke and their facility and reach, and it's night and day. And, there's a lot of kids who would never look at these two institutions as being on equal playing fields. But the issue is, unless somebody starts to go to the HBCU side, this thing will never start to equal out, right? And so I'm really encouraged. I will say that, for the kid who's a top 10 talent, it's a lot less risky than for the kid who may be like a top 50 talent. So I'm hoping that it's the top 10 kids that really make the move, because those are the kids that I think will make a big difference over time.
So in the time that we have left, as we talk about this question, is your money racist? As we talk about stepping up our understanding of what it means to leverage whatever wealth and income that we have, what are the, maybe 2, 3, 5, I'm not going to put a number on it, things you think that we need to be thinking about? Again, we're not LeBron James. We don't have LeBron James money, but we're just, working African Americans, like you said, some blue collar, some white collar, just trying to move forward, but also trying to leverage a difference, particularly in this particular point in our history in this country, as we're trying to turn a corner on race relations, social justice, and economic justice as we address the issues that have been exposed over the last year. What should I do? What should we do from here to go beyond just, I found some Black businesses to spend money with, which again is not a bad thing. We're seeing a spike in the amount of money being spent with Black-owned businesses. But what should we be thinking beyond that as we challenge ourselves to do more?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first thing is to like mentally to decide that it's a good thing to invest with Black businesses across the board. And when I say mentally, I think we also need to be willing to endorse the idea of investing with Black businesses across the board, spending and investing with Black businesses. What I mean by that is that there's this thing that happens, and I'm sure you've seen it, Brother Alfred, where, you know, someone will have a bad experience with a Black business. And they're all over Facebook talking about, see, I tried to buy Black, but then XYZ happened. But every business makes mistakes. How often do you hear somebody decrying all Chinese businesses or all white businesses? Have you ever heard even one person say, I went to the white man, but he didn't do me right? Like you don't hear that.
Nope. We're awfully
Right?
forgiving and forgetting when it comes to that.
It's almost like when we do buy Black, it's like we want an award. Hey, just so you know, I bought Black today. And it was good. Surprise. Like, of course it was good. Like, all I'm getting at is we need to be mentally in a space where we expect the best out of Black businesses. And if they don't deliver, then you talk to that business owner offline and you explain to him or her what they could have done differently. You leave it off of social media. You also need to not paint every Black business with that same brush. You know, a friend of mine recently was trying to get a landscaper and had a bad experience with all the Black landscapers that she dealt with. Okay, maybe in that state or in that city, those specific Black landscapers didn't do a good job for you. But don't then translate that to Black money managers. Don't translate that to Black architects, to Black lawyers, to Black doctors. Let that group speak for itself, but don't apply it on the other side. So that's the first thing is I think we need to first mentally be in a space where we're comfortable with the idea of buying Black. We expand that idea of buying Black to not just include the people we spend money with. Because when you think about it, like I did a little study on myself. I wanted to see, is my money racist? And I'm one that really thinks about buying Black. One of the issues that we have is that so many of our dollars are already committed to non-Black organizations. Think about it. In my household, my biggest expenses are my mortgage, my health insurance, maybe my car loan, right? And so if I wanted to buy Black, 60% of my disposable income is already spoken for in a way that I can't use it for Black people. Now look, I could have an account with a Black bank. I could try to get a mortgage with a Black bank. I'm not saying that these things are impossible to do.
But they're challenging.
But like it's a challenge.
Depending on where you live, especially.
Yeah, for sure. So when you start thinking about buying Black, we often we whittle it down to such a small percentage of possibility. Because like then we start going to the next layer, gas station, grocery store. Like unless you live somewhere near a Black gas station or a Black grocery store, like the possibility gets smaller and smaller. That's why I'm saying almost all of us have a 401k. Almost all of us have an IRA. Almost all of us have hired a professional service person, be it a lawyer, a doctor, whoever. I want us to expand that group because if not, we're really relegating our spend to such a small amount, it might not make a big difference. The last thing I'd say is really have the conversation with your financial advisor. Just ask them. Like they work for you. Like they work for you. And then ask yourself if you're satisfied with the answer. And if not, start to do some research. And I'll tell you again, Black Enterprise, you guys put together great lists of firms. And I'll name some that you can start to look into. There's a firm called Infinity Q. They're based in New York. Super smart guy, a brother named Velasaris. James Velasaris is the CEO of this company. I'll tell you a story real quick. So James was working for a private equity billionaire, and he was in charge of managing a portion of this guy's portfolio inside of the guy's family office. James one day went to his boss and said, "Hey boss, I've been doing a good job for you, haven't I? He said, yes. He said, I'd like to create my own firm. I want you to back me, but I'm going to be the majority owner of this fund. And the guy said, sure, as long as you keep managing my money well, you can start this mutual fund. So when I met James, he was managing outside of that billionaire's money, he was managing in his fund about $40 million. So if I were doing a screen, it never would have showed up because it was too small. He had only been managing money for, as a mutual fund for 2 or 3 years. Actually, not even. I think he was at a year, less than a year. I invested in James's fund. His fund went on to be, in the last 3 years, in the top 1% of all funds in that category. Morningstar just gave him a 5-star rating, which is the highest rating that you could give a fund. Since his inception, he's in the top 10% of all funds in that category. The name of the fund, again, is Infinity Q. That's the name of his firm. We put on our Twitter, and I'll tweet it to you, and I want you to retweet it, a list of other Black money managers. I love the Profits and the Ariel and the Brown Capital Management. I love them. These are the folks who I view, as the trailblazers in our industry. But there's also a number of younger firms, newer firms that are doing a great job. And so again, going back to the third piece, having the conversation with your financial advisor, bring them a list. If it turns out you don't have any money with Black-owned firms, bring them a list. Ask them why not one of these, because I tell you, we do a great job if we're given the opportunity.
Absolutely. And, I want to touch on one more thing that actually came up in another Beyond the Hype interview with Lorene Pendleton, who's a VC and angel investor. And she talked about, this speaks to your point of investing in Black business. So many African Americans actually have the disposable income. Maybe it's not the majority of us, but many of us have the disposable income to either angel invest or to contribute funds that are dedicated to investing in Black-owned or Black-managed companies. And so we talk about the shortage of capital, and there is a shortage of capital for small Black-owned businesses, but there's also a shortage of people who, as you said, think about investing in Black-owned businesses in that way. Not all of us are cut out to literally start up business and build it from the ground up, but there are many people, professionals, former corporate executives, current corporate executives, who have the disposable income to say, you know what, I can angel invest $20,000 in this company. So again, it speaks to your whole mindset of that, about buying Black being not just about being a consumer, but about being an investor.
On that note, so we had on our show this past weekend the executive director of a Black angel investor group called Black Angels Miami. And he brought up a point that I never thought about. He mentioned how even that 1% rule applies to venture capital as well. And he said only 1% of the funding that goes to startups, tech startups, goes to Black companies. And so, yes, everybody knows that we are underrepresented. We're not getting enough of the capital. But the other side of the argument is that, these tech startups can be a chance to make 2, 3, 4 times your money. And if we're not investing in these opportunities, we're missing out on the company side, but also on the investor side to make those returns. And so I think in a lot of cases, I think we have everything that we need to solve the problem. We have money invested. It's just that 100% of it is with white firms in some cases. We might not know which venture capital group, which firms deserve venture capital, but there's organizations like Black Angels Miami out there. There's organizations like Black Enterprise, which you guys often will trumpet a group, a startup that is making some noise in the startup space. So we've got a lot of the resources, we just need to get them organized.
Excellent, excellent. Listen, Allan, thank you so much for being my guest on Beyond the Hype. I gotta have you back on. I can't wait to go on your show. We got to keep this conversation going, man. You're right. I mean, this question, is your money racist? As soon as you said that to me, I was like, wow, that's a topic that we need to talk about. So again, thank you so much for being a guest on Beyond the Hype.
Hey, man, thank you for having me, brother. I hope that this was what you wanted it to be, and I look forward to talking again soon, man.
Great. So you've been listening to Beyond the Hype. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr., Senior VP, Executive Editor at Large at Black Enterprise. Check you later.